Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, staying happy and healthy and hydrated and all that good stuff. And in this video, I have some stories from all over the place that are just weird, bizarre encounters with things. Like, there's no real theme here. So, if that sounds like your cup of tea, then definitely pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I've been on hundreds of camping trips and hikes, and for the most part, I've never had a single spooky experience, except for this one time. We were camping in Northern Maine, and I myself had hiked in alone on a different trail. Everything went pretty well. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I was enjoying the isolation and the calming atmosphere of the wilderness. The day had gone pretty well. I met up with other people, and then I went off to my own space to set up my tent and everything. I was sitting in the opening of my tent, just watching the sunset, as I heard singing off in the distance. I turned my head around, and I saw this young girl across a small valley. She was singing some kind of chant. I don't think she could see me. Her clothes were drab and uninteresting, kinda had holes in them, and looking very outdated. She was very pale, but with long blonde hair. The song was a simple tune, but there was something that sounded off about it. As I listened, I realized that she wasn't singing in English or any language that I've ever heard. I was a little shocked and kind of disturbed because there was such a young girl that seemed to be out here alone in this part of the wilderness, wearing nothing that suits the season. At first I decided to wait and see if she was camping with family or something, but then I saw her sit down and started crying. My phone had no reception, and I had nothing better to do, so I decided I would go over there and see if she needed help. As I started getting closer to her, she stood up and turned around and went off into the thick woods. So I ran, and I tried to make sure that she wouldn't get more lost and tried to catch up to her. I ran up to where she was, but she was gone. And I mean, there was no sound in the distance or anything. Her singing had stopped, and there was no trace of her. I even went to look for her, and I did everything I could, but it was no use, and it was dark by now. I decided that the next day I would have the police scout the area, but tonight I needed to get back to my tent and get some sleep. So I went back to my tent and I got to sleep, and there were no other issues during the night. The next morning, though, something weird happened. There were these little footprints all around my tent. What a day. So the other year, back in 2015, I went in a woods with my friend who's a super talented photographer for her school project. It was the end of the summer, and it was super hot out. I'm wearing this white flowy dress and a flower crown. There's leaves on my feet. Everything is fun and feels like paradise, blah blah blah. Eventually, we get really deep in the woods, and we start taking shots of me holding a candle. My photographer friend says that it's a bit dark and the light sucks, so she tries to arrange the lighting and find a good position. We wander around for a minute or two and just admire the scenery. Suddenly, I see something dark from far away. I'm really curious, and I just go ahead warning my friend that there is something over there that I saw. We go up to it. It's a wardrobe. A big ebony wardrobe in the middle of the woods, like the wilderness. There's nothing around. As I get close enough, I stop. I am hit with this horrible feeling of dread in my chest. Suddenly, I feel cold inside, as if all my happiness has been taken away, sucked out of me. My photographer friend is a bit behind me, and she's been telling me that she's been calling me for about 2 minutes, but I was in some kind of trance. So I snap out of it and say, "Oh, this wardrobe is cool. We should take pictures here." But then the wardrobe begins to rumble and move. We're both startled. It begins to rumble and shake really heavily. We step back away from it. We're pretty scared. It stops. My friend and I are scared shitless, and we don't move an inch. Suddenly, we notice something is seeping out from the ebony doors. It's a dark liquid. I still don't know what the hell it was to this day. Again, we were scared as hell and ran away as fast as I could. My flower crown flew off, but I was scared for my life, to be honest. My friend collected her materials and stuff as quick as she could, and we ran out of there. She was on the verge of crying, saying over and over, "What the hell was that? What the hell was that?" We run away spooked. Later that day, we try to rationalize what happened, that maybe there was an animal stuck or something, but nothing explains that black liquid. On the way home, it started pouring. This has nothing to do with the story, but given how hot it was just weird, and the fog and the wardrobe and the black liquid all kind of added in for the really spooky feeling. So this one is weird, but it happened back in 1996. I was 14 at the time, and me and my dad were out fishing. And we were fortunate enough to have a very large property that had part of a lake on it. So we were back there fishing. And keep in mind that nothing weird or spooky has ever happened in this area. Anyways, my dad is about 30 yards away from me or so, and I'm sitting on this little ledge with my feet dipped in the water. I'm looking over at my dad and just watching what he's doing. And at the same time that I'm doing this, something bumps into my foot. I look down into the water, and I see something that looks kind of like an eel, but not really, tapping against my foot. It's coming from up out of the sand at the bottom. It has no eyes, and it's this weird green color, and very slimy. It looks like it has some scales, but I don't know. I'm so surprised that I just sit there. It keeps tapping my foot, and then it sort of stops with its, I guess, nose against my skin, and then I feel a pinch. My foot instantly goes all tingly, kind of like it's asleep. I freak out and I try to kick the thing off, but it won't come off. I reach into the water and try to pull it off. It's slimy and rough. I feel another pinch. I see that it's connected to my foot by this hair-thin needle that's coming out of the tip of its nose thing. I freak out. I rip it off and yank my feet out of the water. It goes back into the sand, burrowing in there. I go and find my dad, and he says it was probably just some seaweed or something. But later that night, I ran a really high fever, and my foot ached and throbbed. But the next day, I'm fine. I never did find out what stung me, and I never saw it again there. I don't know what it was. So in my family, there are several hunters, and this happened many years ago. I was out with them, and we were heading to a hunting cabin. The place has huge forests with fields in between them. We can drive in the fields for fun during the day on the ATV. One of the hunters tells me to take one of the ATVs and to go check the corn dispenser. Now, driving in these fields during the day to do all that stuff is super fun, but at night, it's not so fun. I didn't want to be considered a pussy by the guys, so I said, yeah, I'll do it. I drive out into the woods with the ATV, with the lights on. I'm around the halfway mark to the dispenser, I stop the ATV. I can hear something walking in the field, but it sounds kind of like a really big rat eating. The lights on the ATV are really terrible, so I can only see maybe about 6 or 7 feet in front of me. It's pitch black except for this light on the front of the ATV, so obviously I can't see anything. I turn off the engine to hear better. For a few seconds there's no noise, but once I regain my bearings, something is close to me. I look to the right of the ATV, and in the corner of my eye, I see something walking over to the light. It looked like a naked mole rat, only it was the size of a Burmese mountain dog. Its face was the worst part. My description wouldn't do it justice, but you can imagine just what this thing looks like. I freeze and I stare at this abomination. It looks at me. Those things that look like eyes suck the soul out of me. It just stares at me for a second or two, then walks out of the light and into the woods. I start the ATV, and I keep telling myself that I was just hallucinating. I was seeing things. I don't want to drive back yet because they'll ask why I got back so quick and if I even checked the dispenser. So I really speed up the driving process, and I just tell myself that I was hallucinating over and over again. And then I get close to the dispenser. I'm driving up the hill that's near it. I turn off my engine again, and I hear the same sound as previously, but this time it's a lot larger. I'm starting to think that the thing that I saw previously was a baby one, or a small one. The sound gets closer. It's no longer one sound, but several. And at this point, I just say, screw the dispenser. I start the engine in panic mode and I peel out of there. The sounds of the engine starting and me peeling out of there must have spooked them, because as I was driving away over the engine, I could hear screeching. And I think, good thing that this is a fast ATV, thank God. I never told anyone what happened, and nothing further with these things happened either. I never saw them again. The rest of our hunting trip went totally normally, but every now and then I still hear the echoing of that eating sound, and it gives me shivers. So I've told this story before, but here it goes. This one time, I gathered some friends to spend the night in the woods. When we got to the place, we left the car in a small parking lot that was just outside the forest, and we started walking in. About 2 hours later, we decided to stop and have lunch. We're all sitting by this really big rock, eating our salad and sandwiches, and then suddenly, we all seemed to collectively notice this really horrible scent. It didn't have any distinct qualities, it was just a bad smell. You can tell by my friends' faces that they smell it too. And I wouldn't know how to describe it. Like I said, it just reeks. It smells bad. So obviously, we're not hungry anymore, and we save the food for later, and we start walking again. The smell seems to follow us, and it gets worse, but then eventually it gets weaker and disappears. When we reached this body of water, I believe it was a lake. We decided to camp right there because we were near a body of water and we wanted to have a fire because it kind of gets cold at night. Some time later, one of my friends stands up and they walk a few feet toward a big trail. And I ask, "Where are you going?" And they say, "Is that a person down there?" We can see somebody walking in the distance. They're walking toward us. We can't really tell at that distance if it's a man or a woman, but we all stand up to be nice and wave at them. And it actually turns out to be a woman wearing a red polar fleece, and she waves back. It's kinda weird seeing someone walking alone out in the area, seemingly just wearing a polar fleece, but nevertheless, when she gets closer, she says hi. We all say hi and invite her to join us. She spends some time with us. She seems pretty cool, and I notice that she's really beautiful. After a while of hanging out and exchanging stories, we ask her if she wants to spend the night with us, and she says, no, it's fine, I should head back anyways. So, me and one of my friends walk with her for a while. We just want to make sure that she's fine, and maybe flirt with her a bit. At some point, she tells us that she lost her watch. About 15 minutes later, she says that she can continue on alone. We're kind of worried because it's still a 2.5 to 3 hour long walk to the parking lot, and it's dark out already, it's late. She tells us not to worry a few times. We give her a Snickers bar and we say goodbye, and we keep looking toward her until we lose her around a bend in the trail. At this point, we start heading back. A few minutes later, that scent comes back. We walk a bit faster, and it follows us right up until we reach the lake again. It just disappears. Anyways, we talk about random stuff with the people that we're with, and then we go to sleep. The next day, we pack our things and we start walking. We take the long way back just to spend some more time together. That smell came back again, but would go away from time to time. Right after having lunch, we see the same woman in the distance. Actually, upon further inspection, it's just her red polar fleece. It's hanging on a branch, and it looks like that somebody was being careful with it. Like just the way that it was placed in the branch. We all look at each other. Everyone looks confused. One of the girls in the group says that we should attempt to look for her because she might have gotten lost. We spend the next couple of hours just walking in big circles around her fleece to see if we can find anything else. We can't really find any trace of her. Some other friend finds something near the fleece. There's this circle in the ground. It's near some trees, and inside the circle there are a few things. There's a watch, a half-eaten Snickers bar, and some small bones. My friend and I are even more confused. We start to panic because we maybe think that she's been kidnapped or something worse. So we keep walking toward the car because it's getting late, and we're afraid that if someone took her, they might be near and they might have a weapon. We reach the car and we drive back home and we tell the police what we saw. To this day, we still don't know what was going on. She said she had lost her watch, and we noticed that she wasn't wearing one, but it's pretty clear she found it at some point. But then, why would she take off her fleece and just leave it there? When I had talked about this before, some people said that she could be living in a cabin, or maybe she came there by car and left by car. And I can tell you that we know the forest quite well, and there's no cabins there. And people saying that she could have left by car, that's true, she could have, but why would she leave all of her things there? Someone said that maybe she had left the place by foot. When we left her, it was getting pretty late too. The shortest path consists on a 2-hour and 30-minute walk until you reach the parking lot, and then she should have kept walking in the dark because the nearest village is about 40 kilometers away from the forest. A young woman walking in the dark with nothing to keep her warm? Possible, but not probable. We still talk about this from time to time, and as I said, we don't know anything about the woman. Maybe there's a very simple explanation that we haven't thought of, and that we're just trying to find weird explanations for something that wasn't weird at all. But I think the creepiest one is in fact that she may have been kidnapped, or there was something else going on with her. Or maybe that we were the last people who saw her, and maybe the kidnapper/killer was still around when we spent the night by the lake, and when we walked all the way out to our car, we haven't found a connection between anything and that bad smell either. I really don't know what happened. So a few years ago, I went on a houseboat trip up the Murray River with some family. Nothing happened until we got pretty far up the river. We crossed over into the next state, into some reserve, I think. My dad and brother-in-laws decided that they wanted to go fishing, so I stayed back with the missus and my two sisters and my mom. We're sitting on the top deck drinking and talking and just having a good time overall. The girls decide to head inside. I lag behind a bit to grab a drink out of the esky. As I'm going down the stairs, I hear a young girl scream across the riverbank. I scan the bank, but I don't see anything. But just the way that scream was made my gut turn, because we hadn't seen people for over a day or more. So an hour or so later, the missus asked me to accompany her on a short walk. We trek in a woods a fair way. And just a note, if you've never been or seen the Australian bush, it's as thick as a 70s porn star's bush, meaning you can't see more than 3 meters in any direction. And after a while we break into a clearing, and we find a rabbit's warren. It's abandoned, but there's no sign of foxes or cats yet. In fact, there's no sign of any animals, not even kangaroos for that matter. I get that bad feeling in my stomach again. We keep walking and find a dried up riverbed. Suddenly, the smell of death floods the air, like not just dead rabbit, but like rotting rabbit guts, basically. I don't have a gun on me because it's Australia and it's a family holiday and we're supposed to be having a good time, not hunting. So I'm feeling naked, exposed, and hunted. I pick up the closest rock to me in case I need a weapon, even if it's just a makeshift one. The missus starts getting worried and says that we should head back. I agree, but the smell follows us all the way back. So does the feeling of being hunted. But nevertheless, we keep going, heading back to the boat. I keep my wife in front of me at all times. I decide to steer her toward the riverbank, but away from the boat. As we get closer, the smell fades, but the feeling doesn't. We break out of the scrub at about 100 meters from the boat. We make our way back there, but we don't mention what happened, because they would just call us nuts. Nothing else of note happened till later that night. That night, we both woke up from a dead sleep at the exact same time. All of a sudden, we hear what sounds like barking coming from the scrub. It's definitely not a dingo or any dog I've heard before, and I grew up out in the bush. Then, another starts barking, and another. I can hear them, but they're a fair ways apart, and then the barks do get closer. When they're a few 100 meters away, they go silent. One more bark, and this one was on the riverbank. I get out of bed against the wishes of my wife, and I peek out the window, and I see something where her and I came out from earlier. It's very hard to make out, but it almost looks like an anorexic person that's kinda slumped over. It's like sniffing the ground. I nope back into bed, and I just go into that scare child mode. Whatever it is, climbs onto the boat. I felt the boat shift when it climbed onto the corner. I hear it pacing past our window. I lay there until the sun comes up. Whatever it was, eventually got bored and left. The next night, we're closer to town. My two brother-in-laws are drunk as all hell, basically wasted, making a bunch of noise by a campfire. We hear this ungodly howl that comes from up the river. They start howling back because they're drunk. There's this silence for a bit, and then that little girl scream, echoed from down the river. It sounded like a person with a pole through their neck trying to scream. We all just went inside the boat. I haven't gone back, and I probably won't, to be honest. So while searching for stories, I realized that I hadn't told one of my own experiences in quite a long time. And since the topic of the video this week is really bizarre, weird encounters and stuff like that, I figured what better time, because that's a lot of the experiences that I've had, you know? So I believe this would have been 2012, I believe. So I know it's going to be convenient, but I did not own a cell phone at the time. My cell phone had broke 9 months prior in 2011, and I was broke, no job, and didn't have a cell phone, nor could I afford one. So, you know, that's just how it be sometimes. But I used to go for walks, like at night, along the tracks, or well, we call them the tracks. There's the old railroad tracks, now turned into a walking trail. And of course, it's wide enough for 2 lanes, and there's ATVs and skidoos and side-by-sides and all that other stuff on there too. But we just referred to it as the tracks. And this also would have been in the early fall. I remember this specific day. It was in September, and it was rather cool for a September day. I was wearing a hoodie, or a zip-up sweater, and I was walking on the tracks, and I had gone quite a bit farther than I normally went. I was feeling especially depressed that day, so I figured, well, let's just keep on walking and see what happens, you know, just kind of be alone with my thoughts for a while. So I walked under the bridge that is in my town. It connects 2 sides of the town. But after I had walked, I want to say maybe a couple kilometers past that, it's all cut down now, I think, but back then it was all just trees. And I saw somebody walk across the trail from the woods, across the trail to the other side of the woods. And I thought that was a little different, but I'm like, well, you know, there are a lot of weird people around here. Wouldn't be out of the ordinary for something like this to happen. So I keep on walking. And I'm walking, and I'm walking, and I get up to the spot where they were, and there's no tracks or anything like that, which, again, not out of the ordinary. It's a gravel trail, so you don't always leave tracks when you walk on it. And then I notice, further up the trail, they walk across again. And I'm like, okay, how did they get up there? Like, I didn't hear them going through the woods. I didn't hear them do anything. But they were wearing a white coat, like a windbreaker, I think. And so I keep on walking because I'm like, okay, is this going to be like one of the people that's more of a danger to themselves kind of thing? So I did the dumb thing while walking, and I called out. I said, do you need help? I can get you to a clinic, or I can tell you where one is, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to that effect, that I can help you if you need help. And I was met with just the typical silence. And I distinctly remember that this part of the woods began to feel quite a bit different, like the only sound, besides like distant cars or birds or whatever, animals, it was just like the gravel under my feet. So I continue to walk, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna turn around soon because I feel weird about this area. So nothing happens for the rest of that part of the walk. When I turn around and I'm coming back down the tracks toward the town, I see once again the same person, but this time they didn't go across the trail. They come up out of the woods, and I stopped. And I thought, okay, maybe they heard me. So I pick up the pace a little bit to get toward them. And when I get up to them, like, they have their back to me for some reason. And I'm saying, hey, do you need help? And I guess this is the part where things got kind of scary for me, because I was pretty sure I could hear him talking, but as I get closer, I realized that it's not talking. The only word to describe it is like gibbering. Like, like he's just moving his mouth and making noises, basically. And I remember the weird part about that being like there would be random little short whistles at some points. It was just really weird. So at that point, I'm like, what the shit is going on here? Like, who is this? And as I get closer to them, they're having the white windbreaker, and I remember the feeling of it. I reached up to touch them on the shoulder, and I touched him on the shoulder, and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he turns around. He's still gibbering. The guy has like a white beard or like a chin strap goatee combo, but he has no eyes. I got a chill right there, just remembering all that. Anyways, he had no eyes. It was just black. So I said, essentially, WTF, and I backed away, and he was still gibbering, still had no eyes. So basically at that point, I just took off running down the trail, and after about 200 feet or so of this straight trail, I realized that he wasn't following me. He was just staring in my direction, and then turned to the side and went back in the woods. And I never went out that part of the woods for quite a while after that, I think. Well, quite a while to me, it would have been a few weeks, which I did go back there a few weeks later with friends to see if we could find the windbreaker or anything. And we didn't find anything. Never saw nothing there before or after. Just that one weird experience. Don't know what it was, don't know who it was, if it was a person. I don't know anything. That happened, and then I left. I waited a while, I went back and didn't find anything. That's basically the story right there. I went for a walk down the railroad tracks, I saw a redacted thing, and then I ran away. The end, essentially. But yeah. If you have any of your own stories, then you can feel free to send them to the email that I have in the description or in the pinned comment. I have a PayPal and a Patreon if that's something that you want to do. And I think with that, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to my rambling story.